I was required, as a member of the local vampire clan, to do anything I could to aid her in her duty. It was then that I remembered my totally unprofessional attire and thanked heaven that I didn't have enough of the blood I drank last night left to manage a noticeable blush. I hurried over to my desk and put on a shirt which I kept in my bottom drawer for emergencies. I was rather thankful that Louise had been kind enough to leave my shoes under the desk. Agent Agate produced a case folder, much to my relief. She said nothing about my odd meeting with her. "Mr. NightCaller, I require your assistance," she continued. "In cases like this, I prefer to work with local law enforcement. In your case, however, I was assured that you are a more competent detective than anyone the police department could offer me. And call me Arohe. Saying agent every minute is awkward." I responded, "Call me Steven." I was rather flattered that someone so important had heard such things about me. The truth is, I'm not sure that my skill as a detective is actually all that great. I can simply say that the local police department detectives should really work harder, and as far as my oftentimes very unwelcome liaison officer, Snyder, I often wonder if he could find an elephant if it were sitting on him. I know that's harsh, but the two of us have a history. The police department insisted to work on any of their cases I have to have a liaison. Snyder was assigned to me because he was very familiar with vampires. The problem is, nobody really thought about why. Detective Derek Snyder lost his entire family to a rogue vampire. I suppose before I go any further, I should explain to you what a rogue vampire is. A rogue vampire is a term for a vampire who rejects the peace accords between humans and non-humans. These vampires are always outcast and cannot join any clan without accepting the accords. Clans function as a support system for vampires. They are our family after we have outlived all of our mortal acquaintances. Rogue vampires tend to live much more like the vampires of old. They kill the human they feed on to prevent detection and live more like real monsters than civilized people. The particular individual that killed Detective Snyder's family is not known. The likely reason for this is that the indiscriminate slaughter of human beings in order to feed is a crime punishable by death under the Accords. Force feeding is handled very much like rape. The guilty vampire has committed two of the most severe offenses known to vampire kind. For a rogue vampire, being discovered is being killed. The majority of them would kill even their own kind in order to keep themselves concealed. It's not surprising that Detective Snyder hates vampires. The problem I have with Snyder is that he doesn't show the professionalism to contain his feelings. The fact that I am still half human doesn't do anything to diminish his hatred either. He brings new meaning to the term hostile work environment. I would have to say that the only reason he doesn't stake every vampire he sees is because he still respects the law. His scruples don't extend to tormenting any unfortunate vampires who should have to deal with him. I have to admit, though, that Arohe Agate was far more pleasant to work with than Detective Q-Ball Snyder. I know the nickname is childish, but I am as forbidden to strike the police officer as any common civilian. I often have to work with him, but I can at least get a little revenge. There is no way I'm going to tolerate the multitude of racial insults he throws me on a daily basis. Abomination, half-breed, bloodsucker, and a list of names much more vulgar than that. Out of respect for you, I won't bother to list the litany of insults he throws at me at every opportunity. Agent Agate chose that moment to clear her throat loudly, bringing me out of my thoughts and back into reality. The case folder she'd thrown on my desk was immediately opened. Inside was a photo of a vampire I knew quite well. Cyrus Calder is a member of the Red Moon clan. I know for a fact that he was born in Saudi Arabia a few centuries back, and that he's not old enough to be one of the elders. I wouldn't call Cyrus a friend, but I've always sort of respected him. He's an unpleasant person, but he takes his sense of honor very seriously. I looked at the paper and asked, "What does this have to do with Cyrus?" "He disappeared last night. The Red Moon clan has already canvassed all of the safe houses within a 20-mile radius. He was last seen inside the Fanged Smile, and he left with a couple of bite junkies." Bite junkies are non-vampires that have become addicted to the sensation of being bitten. This happens with some people because a vampire bite produces a moderately strong euphoric sensation. The controlled application of vampire bites is commonly used within the city as a substitute for powerful painkillers. The majority of people suffer no lasting effect from this euphoric sensation. Bite junkies, on the other hand, tend to become obsessed with it and are a constant harassment to the local vampires. Some vampires choose to take advantage of this because the fresher the blood is, the better it is. I, on the other hand, are unwilling to contribute to their addiction. We easily found Cyrus's regular blood donors. The two of them were curled up at the Full Moon Motel over on Church Street. I knew right away that the women were scared out of their minds of something. The minute I opened the door, they both screamed and pulled a couple of cheap Saturday night specials on me. Note, if you haven't heard the expression, a Saturday night special is a very cheap handgun, in this case a couple of worn-out .22 pistols. 22 rounds generally can't do enough harm to stop anyone with vampiric blood, but there are a lot of nasty little tricks easily added to even the cheapest handgun ammunition to make them far more dangerous. Arohi, thankfully, took charge and was able to calm the women down. I should mention to you that, unlike yourself, I'm not at all good dealing with highly upset people. Both women looked like hell, and at least one of them looked inebriated enough to be incapable of standing. I felt more than a little sorry for them. After about 20 deep breaths, they were able to calm down and began to tell the two of us the story. They introduced themselves as Fawn and Jewel. The use of party names, as they are known in common among bite junkies. This became general practice because of how frowned upon such activities became in the city. I knew for a fact that neither of them gave their real names, but the information they had given was enough to find out if I needed to. Fawn, the younger of the two women, began to explain to us what happened. Cyrus was feeding on Jewel, she said, motioning to the other woman, and I was getting ready for my turn when all of a sudden a monster leapt through the window. I couldn't help but give the woman a dirty look. I'm well aware that vampires and all other such non-humans were in the past regarded as monsters, but using that word at any point since the treatise is considered extremely insulting and offensive. Fawn waved her hands in front of herself as if to ward off my angry glare and said, "No, I don't mean a normal non-human like the two of you," she said emphatically, glancing at first me, then Arohi. I immediately asked, "What do you mean, miss?" "I don't know," she said, fear returning to her face. "It was a ragged thing, flesh hanging off chains on the wrist and ankles. It attacked Cyrus, and he told the two of us to run for our lives. We did as we were told. We never imagined it would be able to hurt him. We tried to go to the police, but you know how they treat people like us." She was right. I did know how police typically regarded bite junkies. A lot of the cops I knew told me that it wasn't uncommon to arrest 3 or 4 a night, running around out of their head on a combination of a post-feeding high and blood loss. Arohi cut in quickly and asked, "Where did all this take place?" "We were over at Pan's Dungeon in the Red Light District." Pan's Dungeon is an S&M club over in the seediest part of town. While being a bite junkie isn't illegal, it is tremendously frowned upon. It's not unusual for such activities to be carried out in the seediest parts of town. Arohi was all business. "How quickly can we get over there, Stephen?" "Well, I can shadow walk us over," I answered, feeling a little bit embarrassed. "Oh, I read about that in the file on you. You can walk through shadows like they were doorways, right?" I answered in the affirmative and walked over to the shadow of the building. To my delight and embarrassment, she walked into my arms and put her arms around me. I immediately called on my abilities, and we reappeared in the alley next to Pan's Dungeon. Arohi pressed her hand to my face and said, "Damn, that felt weird." "You get used to it," I said, as I steadied her. As soon as she got back to her footing, I walked directly into the front door of Pan's Dungeon. The goat man behind the counter made a startled bleat and looked as if he were about to make for the back door. Of all the people that could be working at this 2-bit S&M joint, it had to be Bob. Bob is possibly the nastiest satyr that ever existed. In the past, I've caught him twice for bootlegging videos and smuggling torture porn. Bob claimed that because he's a follower of Pam, the god of sex and torture, that his actions were an attempt at missionary work. The religious excuse saved him from the worst penalties for his actions, but the entire police force and I still make a point to keep an eye on him. This is why the first reaction he had upon seeing me was attempting to run for the hills, which he failed to do because using a little vampiric speed, I put myself between him and the back door. "I'm afraid I'm going to have to insist you stick around for at least a few minutes, Bob." Bob made a nervous bleat and sat down behind the counter. "What the hell do you want?" "This place is all on the up and up. Get out of here before I call the cops and file for charges of harassment," he snapped, crossing his arms. Arohi joined in at that moment. She walked up and wrapped herself around my arm as if she were my girlfriend and said in a seductive voice, "Mr. Bob, we're just here for good times. We're sorry about the broken window." We want to try the room that Mr. Cyrus always uses." She then pretended to be nude under her trench coat, and opening it instead of the view of her he had expected, Bob got an eyeful of her GEB ID card. Sweat beaded on Bob's face. If I know anything about Bob's character, I know that there will never come a day when he's a law-abiding citizen. I generally operate under the idea that at any one time he's breaking at least a few laws. The last thing Bob would ever want would be a GEB agent paying particular attention to him. Bob may be dishonest, but he isn't stupid. He took a deep breath and then responded, "All right, sweetheart, you get the same room you used the last time. If you break anything else, you bought it." He then nonchalantly tossed a room key into her hand. I followed her lead and said, "Come on, baby, let's go have some fun." The two of us hurried upstairs and into room 33.